You're witnessing something big before your very eyes. After the media and finance, we're finally seeing a rapid breakdown of the traditional education system as it decentralizes and takes away power from the hands of universities that have enjoyed a monopoly for too long. Victor Davis Hanson has a dire warning before that happens because that old and decadent system of education is trying to fight back and doing a lot of damage while trying to cling on to any sort of relevance that it can. But there are some smart moves in your individual life that a young person can still make, which is exactly what I need to tell you about. So subscribe to the channel and watch this incredible clip before we get into it.
I always used to say that the craziest idea in a faculty lounge takes about 2 years to be implemented in the White House. So it's very influential. There's too many people going to four-year colleges and they're not learning anything. We have 1.7 trillion in debt. And so the university is very culpable because we have this problem now where we went from 2.1 fertility down to 1.6. It's catastrophic in 25 years. So we've got this whole generation of young people, primarily also male young people, who they're not getting married, they're not buying houses, they're not having children, which is affecting our fertility rate, and they're encumbered. And you look at, and I have them in my own family, and I talk to them. How did you get 150,000 niece or nephew? And the majors that they go 3 units here, 6 units here, 5 units here, and they consume their 20s because of this myth of the 4-year degree. And then you have these universities, and you say to them, and I've said this to a lot of administrators, why don't you just tell, when I buy a car, I'm told exactly what the monthly payment is, what the total cost is, and am I aware of all the ins and outs? And I have a 17-page thing to fill out. Would you just tell the student when they take these loans, what is the average compensation of a sociology major, a psych major, a classics major, whatever it is, just tell them how much the interest will cost them, and what is the price per unit in dollars, so that they can make a decision.
The reality is they'll never do it. The traditional university system in the United States for decades has faced somewhat of a similar problem as when a highly socialized medical system faces. It's that when the government comes in between them, the institutions that provide the service can hide some important financial details in the fine print because they know that the buyers are not directly paying for it at the moment. The traditional pathway to a university education laden by student loans faces that exact problem, allowing the universities that exist in an isolated market that know competition. Do you think a young student in their 20s can get tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in loan for anything else that easily? And it's that lack of competition that gives enough room to these universities to increase tuition while not raising the quality of the education, all the while the increasing number of degrees in the market means they are less valuable each year, and that doesn't even factor in the amount of ideological indoctrination that goes on these universities as they become unwitting participants in the culture wars of our time to their own detriment. That's partially what led to the resignation of Harvard President Claudine Gay earlier this year, bringing a lot of bad press and notoriety for one of the most prestigious education institutes in the world.
But I had a guy in Silicon Valley last year, I gave a lecture, and he came up to me, and I said, at some point their reputations are going to suffer, these 4-year colleges, because they're watered down the curriculum and it's DEI. And he said, where have you been, Victor? He said, in the last 3 years, Stanford University let in 20% white students. We don't care what color they are. But to get that ratio, they had to exclude people that were brilliant. So they rejected 70% of those who had a perfect SAT, even though it was it was a choice. They sent it in, and that became a mark of vulnerability. It's like 0.11% of the SAT get perfect scores. Stanford refused 60 or 70% of them that applied.
In other words, these universities are becoming a battleground for the same DEI policies that for long had been a fixture of the culture that surrounded it, and much like the culture, that erosion of meritocracy is going to strike at the knee of their entire financial edifice. Because here's the unspoken truth in the corporate world about most of the Ivy League universities, the reason they choose to hire from these institutes is not entirely because of some otherworldly quality of education they provide. The real value in their degree lies in their vetting process, which for names like Harvard and MIT was basically a guarantee that only the cream of the intellectual crop could have the name attached to their degree. But since that's not the case anymore with diversity quotas and affirmative action policies, these universities are losing what made them relevant in the first place. They fail to understand that positive discrimination is just negative discrimination in another direction, and it's only so long before the jig is up and most of the corporate world no longer attaches the same value to their graduates as they used to. Not just that, I think we've seen something else as well as the past 10 months after October 7th, which is how much of a hotbed these education institutes have become for political activism, and how easy it is for outside forces to influence internal policy, considering a large chunk of the budget for these Ivy League universities consists of grants, donations, and endowments. To be exact, Harvard itself reports that endowments make up over 37% of their total budget, which makes you wonder just how much they're serving their students versus serving the interest of the donor.
The universities are no longer meritocratic. And that's even going into medical school, law school, business school. And so a lot of people are saying, I want my child to go get skills. I want him to go to a trade school. I want him to go to a community college. And the elite now, believe it or not, I get a call twice a week. Victor, I'm not going to send my kid to Harvard, Yale, where I went, or Stanford. Is it Hillsdale? Is it Pepperdine? Is it St. Thomas Aquinas? Where do I send my child? Or do I send them to University of Oklahoma State? And so I'm very confident that there's a revolutionary movement in education to get rid of this toxic, I have a bunch of letters after my name, therefore I'm educated, therefore I'm an expert. And what the universities have done is almost criminal, to put us, the taxpayers, on a $1.7 trillion exposure so they can raise their rates of tuition above the rate of inflation, and they're not accountable, and their students they're not competitive compared to other universities.
I think that's part of the reason that in the United States now, trade schools are seeing the fastest rate of increase they've had in a long time. It's been reported that 52% of graduates in America remain underemployed for a year after they get their degree, which is making a lot of people reconsider the cost versus benefit of a full 4-year degree over a vocational program that makes the employment ready in a few short months. Someone like Victor David Hanson, who's spent decades inside the education system, is best positioned to see that and offer valuable advice to a student that stands at the crossroads. Let me know in the comments if you agree, because the time and money that a degree requires can be one of the most important financial decisions that you ever make.